What happens when a grandmother is told she's no longer welcome at her own family's holiday table? Agnes decides to host a feast of her own, and what unfolds next changes everyone's idea of family. Agnes Turner had always been the backbone of her family's holidays. Her hands, weathered, strong and quick, had kneaded the dough for Thanksgiving rolls, tied bows for Christmas gifts, and wiped tears at New Year's toasts for decades. Her house, a warm yellow colonial, had stood witness to generations of laughter, arguments, burnt casseroles, and reconciliations. She never imagined that a holiday season would arrive without her at the center. That illusion shattered on a chilly November afternoon, when her phone chimed with a new email. Agnes sat at her kitchen table, a pot of tea steaming beside a to-do list filled with shopping and recipe notes. The subject line read simply, "Holiday plans, please read." It was from Eric, her son-in-law. She opened it, expecting maybe a schedule or a dish request. Instead, her eyes widened as she read, then reread, the curt message. "Dear Agnes, after discussing with Sarah and the kids, we believe it would be best if you sat out this year's holiday gatherings. We feel the younger generation should take over. We appreciate your understanding. Eric." No love, Sarah. No invitation to coordinate. Not even a request for her signature stuffing recipe. Agnes's hand shook as she put down her mug. For a moment, the world felt blurry and distant, like she was floating above her own life. Memories flickered before her eyes. Her grandchildren's first Christmases, Sarah's teenage meltdowns soothed in the kitchen, Tom's booming laughter echoing over the turkey. Had she become so obsolete, so quickly? Or was this Eric's latest maneuver to control the family, something she'd sensed growing, but always brushed off for Sarah's sake? She tried to call her daughter. The line went to voicemail. A text from Paul, her son living across the country, popped up. "Sorry, Mom. Didn't know. I thought Eric was joking. Call if you want." The isolation stung worse than the cold draft leaking through her kitchen window. Over the next days, Agnes oscillated between heartbreak and indignation. She busied herself volunteering at the church pantry, cleaning her already spotless house, baking for the freezer, but her energy was hollow. Neighbors noticed the difference. Her old friend Ruth caught her crying in the garden one afternoon. "What's wrong, Aggie?" Ruth asked, offering a handkerchief. Agnes told her everything. Ruth was indignant. "After all you've done for them? Honey, if your family wants a holiday without you, let them have it. But don't you dare sit here alone. If they won't make you a seat at the table, you make your own table." That night, Agnes lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Ruth's words echoed. She remembered Tom's voice from years ago, urging her to stand tall and never let anyone treat her as less than family. She decided she would not let Eric, or anyone, erase her from her own story. The next morning, Agnes took out her address book and phone. She started dialing. Her friend from church who'd lost her husband last year, the young single mom on her street, the neighbor whose kids had moved to the city, even the shy postman she always saw eating lunch alone at the park. Each call was a risk, a stretch outside her comfort zone. Some were surprised. Some were grateful. Some cried. Agnes felt her energy returning, like warmth seeping back into cold hands. Word began to spread, and so did Agnes's determination. She started prepping her house, polishing silver that hadn't seen daylight in years, airing out the old guest room, shopping for extra chairs. She baked pies and froze casseroles. She spent long evenings drafting invitations and hand-delivering them with a personal touch and a smile. Then, at the grocery store, fate handed her another twist. She bumped into her grandson Adam, home from college. He hugged her tight, then frowned. "Why aren't you coming to Mom and Eric's? They said you were sick." Agnes's eyes brimmed with tears. "No, sweetheart. I just wasn't invited." Adam's expression hardened with anger and sadness. "That's not right, Grandma. Tell me what I can do." Agnes squeezed his hand. "Come to my house instead. Bring your friends if you want. There's always room." That night, as she lit candles and set the table for a feast that, days earlier, didn't exist, Agnes felt a sense of pride blooming in her chest. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't be invisible. Not now. Not ever. Agnes woke before dawn, the kind of restless excitement she hadn't felt in years sending her bustling through the house. The smell of yeast rolls rose from the kitchen, blending with the scent of floor polish and cinnamon. She placed freshly laundered linens on the guest bed and arranged tiny pumpkins down the center of the table, making sure every place had a little something special. By mid-morning, she was walking door to door, invitations in hand. Her handwriting, proud and looping, promised good food, open hearts, and plenty of stories. She delivered one to the Hendersons, whose grown children couldn't make it home, another to Mrs. Becker, who always brought homemade fudge to church events, and several to families she'd known for years. She even slipped an invitation into the hand of her shy new neighbor, Carmen, a recent widow who barely left her house. Some people hugged her. Others looked surprised. All said yes. Agnes felt her confidence growing, step by step, as if the town itself was rooting for her. Meanwhile, Eric was orchestrating his own event with military precision. He sent a group text, strict instructions for side dishes, arrival times, even dress code, no jeans. He assigned Sarah to manage Grandma's absence, and made sure every guest knew that this year would be streamlined and sophisticated. Agnes's absence was brushed aside as a health precaution, though nobody had actually asked her how she felt. Sarah called late that night, her voice tight. "Mom, I'm sorry." Eric thought, well, he thought you might be too tired to host this year. He's trying to make things easier for everyone. Agnes felt a sting but kept her voice steady. Easier for whom, Sarah? I've never missed a Thanksgiving in 40 years. Sarah sighed. It's just 1 year, Mom. Maybe next year you can take over again. Agnes heard the rehearsed words and the unspoken pressure behind them. I'm not a coat you hang in the closet, Sarah. I'm still part of this family. If you want to come by, my door's open. Sarah hesitated, then mumbled an excuse and hung up. Agnes stared at the phone, then set it down, her mind racing with frustration and resolve. The next morning, Agnes focused her energy on the feast. She called Adam and arranged for him to help move chairs and set up extra tables. You sure you want to skip Dad's party? She asked. Adam's reply was instant. He only invited my roommate to make a point about modern family values. I'd rather spend the day with people who actually like each other. As Thanksgiving drew closer, Agnes's house turned into a beehive of activity. Neighbors dropped off folding chairs, extra casseroles, and bags of groceries. Ruth showed up with a stack of board games and a bottle of cheap wine. Carmen, the widow, arrived shyly with homemade tamales, her eyes bright with anticipation. On the morning of the feast, Agnes was up before the sun. She basted chickens, whipped sweet potatoes, and arranged the pies on her grandmother's cake stand. The house glowed with warmth and the anticipation of company. But the outside world, and Eric's control, lingered like a cold draft. Paul called from out of state, torn between loyalty and regret. I wish I could be there, Mom. Eric says you're mad at everyone. Agnes managed a smile he could hear through the phone. I'm not mad, Paul. I'm just not invisible. There's a difference. By midday, guests began to trickle in, some with casseroles, others with stories, all with gratitude. The laughter started in the hallway and spilled into the kitchen. Adam showed up with friends and a new board game. Mrs. Becker brought fudge, and Carmen's tamales were a hit. Agnes floated from table to stove, heart swelling with pride. The room buzzed with energy, everyone feeling the freedom to be themselves. There were toasts, jokes, and songs, an unexpected harmony, not streamlined but utterly alive. Then, just as the feast was at its liveliest, there was a sudden knock at the door, a moment that would shift the day in ways no one could have imagined. As laughter echoed through Agnes's warm, bustling house, the knock at the door cut through the merriment like a sudden clap of thunder. Conversation dropped to a hush. Adam looked at his grandmother, raising his eyebrows. Agnes wiped her hands on her apron, steeled herself, and opened the door. There, standing in the cold November air, was Sarah. She was bundled in her elegant wool coat, her cheeks flushed, a hint of guilt behind her painted smile. In her arms, she clutched a foil-covered dish. Behind her, just visible on the walkway, Eric paced back and forth, looking uncomfortable and occasionally peering at his phone. "Hi, Mom," Sarah said, trying for casual, but her voice was brittle. I brought your favorite cranberry relish. Eric and the kids are just finishing up at our house. I thought I'd Stop by for a minute." Agnes stepped back, gesturing her in with a gracious smile, refusing to let old pain show. "Of course, Sarah. There's always room at my table." Her voice was gentle, but she held her head high. Adam quickly slipped from his seat to hug his mother, which Sarah accepted gratefully, though her eyes scanned the room with a mixture of longing and embarrassment. The crowd inside greeted Sarah warmly, Ruth with her bright eyes, Mrs. Becker waving a chocolate-stained hand, even Carmen nodding in shy welcome. Agnes led Sarah to the kitchen, accepted the cranberry dish, and handed her a cup of cider. The women leaned against the counter, surrounded by the scents of cinnamon, roast chicken, and caramelizing apples. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with everything left unsaid. Finally, Sarah whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. Eric. He just wanted things done his way this year. I didn't want to hurt you." Agnes sighed, feeling the weight in her chest lighten just a little. "I know, honey. But I need you to understand, this is my family, too. I have more to give, even if it's not on Eric's schedule." From the other room, laughter burst out, a game of charades gone off the rails. Adam's friend tried to mime Pilgrim, collapsing in laughter as everyone guessed Angry Duck instead. Sarah's lips trembled, then curved into a genuine smile. For the next hour, Sarah drifted between the kitchen and the crowded living room, hugging old friends, sharing stories, and even helping Carmen and Ruth plate dessert. When Adam started a toast, Sarah found herself blinking back tears, not out of sadness, but out of a happiness she hadn't felt in a long time. Then, Eric appeared in the doorway, stiff as ever, holding the youngest of their children by the hand. "Sarah, it's time to go." He looked past Agnes, scanning the room like a security guard at a party he hadn't authorized. Sarah hesitated, looking from Eric to Agnes. The house buzzed around them, everyone, it seemed, waiting to see what she would do. Agnes, for her part, kept her voice steady. "Eric, you're welcome to join us. There's plenty of food, and you'll find we're not as old-fashioned as you think." Eric gave a tight smile. "No, thank you. We have other plans." He tugged gently at his daughter's hand, but the little girl twisted away, darting into the living room to play with Adam's friends. For the first time, Eric looked uncertain. He lingered by the door as Sarah, torn between her husband and her mother, hovered in the kitchen, lost in the swirl of competing loyalties. Agnes stepped in, turning to her grandson and guests. "Adam, why don't you help your uncle make a plate? We have enough for an army." The table was quickly reset, the chairs rearranged. The energy in the room was irresistible. Even Eric found himself handed a plate of roast chicken by Ruth, who insisted, "Nobody leaves this house hungry, not even the ones who wear ties on Thanksgiving." As the meal resumed, so did the laughter, and the house seemed to expand to fit everyone, invited or not. Agnes sat at the head of her table, watching her fractured family slowly, awkwardly, begin to stitch itself back together in the warm chaos she had always known how to create. But in her heart, Agnes knew that hosting a feast was only the beginning. The real challenge would be finding her place in her family's future, no matter what anyone else tried to decide for her. The long dining table groaned under the weight of Agnes's handiwork: golden roast chickens, fluffy biscuits, jewel-bright cranberry relish, creamy potatoes, pies stacked like edible trophies. Guests, some old friends and some almost strangers, mingled together in the crowded, candlelit warmth. The house rang with competing stories and bursts of laughter. But at the far end of the table, the air vibrated with a different energy. Eric sat stiff-backed, his fork clinking nervously against his plate, eyes darting from Sarah to Adam, then to Agnes. He kept glancing at his phone, fielding polite but pointed questions from Ruth and Mrs. Becker. Adam, delighted by the company, did his best to lighten the mood with stories from college and jokes with the children. Sarah, torn, sat between Eric and Agnes, her hand resting on their youngest daughter's hair. The little girl giggled at Carmen's Spanish lullabies, oblivious to the tension swirling above her. Agnes took her seat at the head of the table. She caught Eric's gaze and offered him a gentle smile. "I hope you like chicken, Eric. It's not turkey, but it's what I could afford this year." Eric's mask slipped a little. "Thank you, Agnes. It's delicious." He poked at his food, clearly unused to being a guest in a home where he'd expected to be the host, or, perhaps, the gatekeeper. Conversation ebbed and flowed. Mrs. Becker reminisced about holiday snowstorms past, Ruth regaled everyone with the story of Agnes teaching her to bake apple pie. Adam showed off a silly card trick. Carmen, shy at first, revealed she'd once worked as a chef, and soon the kitchen was abuzz with requests for her tamale recipe. But every now and then, an awkward silence would fall, usually after Eric spoke. He tried, a little too hard, to steer the conversation. "At our house, we always start with a formal toast," he declared. Agnes smiled, not missing a beat. "Well, here, everyone gets a chance to say what they're grateful for, no speeches required." One by one, the guests chimed in, sharing not just thanks for the food but for company, for new friends, for second chances and unexpected invitations. Adam toasted to grandmas who never quit. Even Carmen, voice trembling, gave thanks for being welcomed when I was afraid of being alone. Eric, suddenly put on the spot, cleared his throat. "I suppose I'm grateful my wife convinced me to come here." He glanced at Sarah, whose eyes shone with tears and pride. The tension eased, replaced by something more genuine, a sense of belonging, maybe even humility. As the plates emptied and pie was served, laughter began to bridge the gap between old grudges and new hope. When the meal was over, Agnes gathered everyone in the living room for music. Adam strummed the guitar, Ruth tapped her cane in time, and soon even Eric found himself singing along, tentatively at first, then with more confidence as the room filled with the spirit of togetherness. Later, as guests gathered their coats and leftovers, Agnes hugged each one, whispering words of thanks and encouragement. Eric shook her hand, hesitated, then leaned in for a brief, awkward hug. "Thank you for having us, Agnes. I see now how much these traditions mean." Sarah lingered, tears on her cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have fought harder for you." Agnes brushed her hair back, her own eyes shining. "You're here now, darling. That's all I ever wanted." The house, once so quiet, now glowed with the memory of a feast that no one, least of all Eric, would soon forget. As Agnes cleaned up that night, the sound of distant laughter echoing in her ears, she realized she had not only reclaimed her place, but redefined it on her own terms. The next morning, sunlight spilled through Agnes's kitchen window, illuminating the aftermath of the feast: empty pie plates, mugs dotted with dried cocoa, stray napkins under chair legs. Agnes hummed as she tidied up, her heart light despite her aching feet and hands. She replayed moments from the night before: Adam's jokes, Ruth's laughter, even Eric's hesitant participation in the sing-along. She could still hear Sarah's whispered apology and feel the fierce hug from her youngest granddaughter. Before long, Adam showed up at the door, eager to help clear away the mountain of dishes. He recounted snippets of conversation from the party. "Grandma, Carmen wants you to teach her to make apple pie. And Mrs. Becker says next year she's bringing her famous peppermint bark. Everyone's already asking if we'll do this again." As they scrubbed pans and folded linens, Agnes's phone buzzed with new messages, thank yous, photos, recipes, and invitations in return. Even neighbors who hadn't attended sent kind words. Agnes felt something new swelling inside her, not just pride, but a sense of belonging outside the narrow boundaries Eric had tried to draw. Adam sat at the table with her, sipping reheated cider. "You know, Grandma, it felt more like a real holiday here than anywhere else. People were themselves. Nobody was trying to impress anyone or keep score." Agnes smiled. "Holidays are about hearts, not perfection. It's the stories, not the centerpieces, that hold us together." She saw Adam's eyes brighten with understanding. That afternoon, Ruth and Carmen stopped by, bringing leftover tamales and board games. They laughed together as they replayed the best moments from the night before. Mrs. Becker dropped in with her fudge, declaring, "You're starting something here, Agnes. You know that, don't you?" The house was once again full of noise, warmth, and company. Late in the day, Sarah called. Her voice was hesitant but sincere. "Mom, thank you for inviting us. Eric keeps talking about how much fun the kids had. He's not used to letting go. He saw something different last night, how people relax when they're welcome, not managed." Agnes heard hope in her daughter's voice. "You're welcome any time, Sarah. I hope Eric sees there's room at my table for everyone, including him." Sarah's reply was quiet. "He's coming around. He even said maybe next year you should host Thanksgiving for everyone. He's not ready to admit it to you yet, but I think last night changed him. As dusk fell, Agnes gathered her guests around the living room once more. The sun set over the rooftops, bathing the room in soft gold. They shared stories, funny, bittersweet, and sometimes deeply vulnerable. Carmen told of her first Christmas after her husband died, how she'd almost given up on the holidays until Agnes's invitation. Ruth shared the tale of the year her own children couldn't come, and she'd realized she could adopt a new family among friends. Adam read aloud the list of everyone who'd helped, and Agnes felt tears prick her eyes, not of sorrow, but gratitude. She realized that, in hosting a feast for the forgotten, she'd woven a new tapestry of kinship, one built not by blood or obligation, but by kindness and choice. That night, Agnes lit a single candle and sat by the window, the echo of voices and music lingering. She'd stood her ground, transformed her loneliness into a celebration, and reminded her family, Eric included, that no one could write her out of her own story. As she blew out the candle, she promised herself this: every year, there would be a place at her table for anyone in need. Her home would never be silent for the holidays again. Word of Agnes's holiday feast spread quickly through the neighborhood and beyond. By Monday, her phone buzzed non-stop. Friends, neighbors, even distant relatives who'd heard about her alternative Thanksgiving wanted to know if it was true she'd thrown a bigger, happier, and more welcoming gathering than the one hosted by her own family. Ruth teased her over coffee. "Aggie, you're a legend now. I heard from Mrs. Olson at the pharmacy that next year she's making her famous yams for your table. Says she hasn't been out for a holiday in 5 years." Agnes laughed, pouring more coffee. "Let's hope she leaves the marshmallows at home this time." Even Carmen, who had hardly spoken to anyone before the feast, started joining community events. Her tamales became the talk of the block, and she soon found herself surrounded by new friends, something Agnes saw with quiet satisfaction. But as Agnes's reputation soared, Eric's careful plans began to unravel. A few of Sarah's cousins, who had skipped his streamlined Thanksgiving, confessed they wished they'd joined Agnes instead. "I got 3 text messages the night of the party, Mom," Sarah admitted one evening. Eric's pride is hurt, but he's also curious. He asked if you'd share your stuffing recipe. Agnes just smiled. "Maybe next year he'll learn it from me in person." Paul called from out of state, having seen a Facebook post from Adam. "Mom, I didn't know you had it in you. The kids want to come visit at Christmas if you're hosting." That same day, Mrs. Becker dropped off a thank you card signed by nearly a dozen attendees. Inside was a note: "You brought the holiday back to life. Don't let anyone ever keep you out of your own family again." Meanwhile, Sarah struggled to balance her loyalties. She made a point to visit Agnes more often, sometimes bringing the kids, sometimes just staying for coffee and a quiet talk. Agnes noticed a shift in her daughter. Less stress, more openness, a willingness to talk honestly about her marriage, her frustrations, and her gratitude for her mother's resilience. One afternoon, while helping Agnes pack up autumn decorations, Sarah spoke quietly. "I want to do things differently, Mom. I want the girls to grow up knowing that family is more than schedules and matching napkins. I want them to see what you did, how you made everyone feel at home." Agnes squeezed her daughter's hand. "You can, Sarah. Just keep your door and your heart open. That's all it takes." At church, people approached Agnes for advice on mending rifts, inviting lonely neighbors, and even making more room at their own tables. She found herself giving gentle counsel to couples, single parents, and the elderly, reminding each that belonging is something you build, not something you're given. But as Christmas approached, the old wounds threatened to resurface. Eric, seeing his grip on holiday tradition slip, suggested a more formal family dinner, at a restaurant, no less. The suggestion fell flat, met with polite silence and veiled disappointment from Sarah and the children. Adam, now a champion for his grandmother's cause, organized a petition, "Christmas at Grandma's, who's in?" The signatures piled up. Even Ruth threatened to bring the choir for carols. Agnes realized that, though the fight for her place in the family wasn't truly over, she had changed the story. Her home was now the center of a growing circle, one that welcomed old friends and new, lost family and lonely hearts. Her table, once threatened with absence, was now overflowing. As she planned her Christmas menu, Agnes smiled at the thought of what her feast had become. Not just a meal, but a beacon, proof that sometimes, when you're forced out, you come back bigger, brighter, and surrounded by those who truly value you. The days before Christmas arrived with a rush of snow flurries and anticipation. Agnes's house, now a well-known gathering place, became a hive of preparations. She hung garlands over the fireplace, polished her old holiday platters, and accepted armfuls of pine boughs from neighbors eager to help. The phone rang nearly every hour, Adam confirming guests, Ruth suggesting carols, Carmen offering to cook a new dish, Mrs. Becker organizing a gift exchange for the children. For Agnes, it was a kind of redemption. She took pride in each invitation sent, each RSVP received, proof that her feast had planted roots, transforming her once lonely house into a community tradition. But as Christmas Eve neared, tension simmered in the background. Eric, feeling his control slip, doubled down on his plans for a formal family dinner at a downtown restaurant. Sarah relayed the message to Agnes with an apologetic shrug. "He's stubborn, Mom. He thinks it'll be easier. Just pay a bill and go home." Agnes shook her head, refusing to let bitterness return. "That's not what the holidays are for. They're about sharing, about stories, about feeling like you belong. Not just convenience." Sarah looked weary. "He's upset that so many people want to come here. I don't know what to do." Agnes reached across the kitchen table, squeezing her daughter's hand. "Invite him. Again. If he comes, he comes. If not, there's a place for him if he changes his mind." Adam, emboldened by his grandmother's quiet strength, texted all the cousins and friends, "We're doing Christmas Eve at Grandma's. Potluck style. Bring food, bring games, bring yourselves. Don't worry about dressing up." The response was overwhelming, yes after yes, including several friends and neighbors who had nowhere else to go. On Christmas Eve, Agnes's house filled with laughter, music, and the scent of cinnamon and pine. There were so many guests they had to borrow chairs from 3 different homes. Ruth led carols at the piano, Carmen served her spicy tamales, and Mrs. Becker presented her peppermint bark to cheers. Children played tag in the hallway while adults swapped stories and drank cider. As the sun set and the first snowflakes drifted down, there was a knock at the door. The room quieted. Adam answered, and there stood Eric, holding a small gift bag and looking nervous, Sarah beside him. For a moment, everyone seemed to hold their breath. Agnes welcomed him warmly, making no mention of past tensions. "There's a seat for you, Eric. And plenty of food. We're glad you're here." Eric hesitated, then smiled, a genuine, small smile. "Thank you, Agnes. I see now. This is what the holidays are supposed to be." The family gathered for the meal, and Agnes asked everyone to share one thing they were grateful for. Adam thanked his grandmother for bringing everyone together. Ruth gave thanks for found family. Even Eric, after a pause, said, "I'm grateful to be reminded what matters." As Agnes looked around her home, at old friends and new faces, at the warmth and joy that had replaced loneliness and exclusion, she knew the feast she'd fought for was no longer just hers. It belonged to everyone at her table, and to everyone who would ever need a place to belong. That night, as the house grew quiet and the last carol faded, Agnes wrote a note in her recipe book, "Never let anyone take your place at your own table. Family is where you make it, and you can always make more room." New Year's Eve arrived, bringing with it a dusting of snow and the sound of laughter drifting from Agnes's bright window. Her house, still aglow with the memory of Christmas, felt more alive than ever. The scars of the previous months, the sting of Eric's ban, the ache of Sarah's indecision, had faded, replaced by warmth, friendship, and something Agnes hadn't realized she'd been missing, hope. As neighbors dropped in with leftover cookies and children tumbled in to play games, Agnes's phone buzzed with a message from Paul. "Mom, the kids are begging to come next year. We miss you." Even Eric, who now greeted Agnes with genuine warmth, stopped by that afternoon to drop off a bottle of wine, sheepish but grateful. "Thank you for showing me what I'd forgotten, Agnes. This house, it's special. I want my girls to remember it too." The town was abuzz about Agnes's second chance feast. Friends brought stories of neighbors who'd started hosting their own inclusive dinners. Even the local church asked Agnes to help plan the next community potluck. Each invitation, each word of thanks, chipped away at any doubt she'd ever had about her place in the world. On New Year's Day, Agnes hosted one more small gathering, her core circle, the found family that had anchored her when she felt adrift. Ruth, Carmen, Mrs. Becker, Adam, Sarah, Eric, and the children gathered for a brunch of sweet rolls and black coffee. The children decorated the windows with homemade snowflakes. The adults shared resolutions and gentle laughter. After the meal, Sarah pulled Agnes aside. Her voice was earnest, her eyes shining. "Mom, I was wrong to go along with Eric. I let someone else decide who belonged in our family. Never again. Promise me you'll always keep the door open." Agnes hugged her daughter tightly. "The door's open, Sarah. For you, for the kids, for anyone who needs it. That's how family grows." Adam, overhearing, called out from across the room, "Grandma, next year we'll need a bigger table." Everyone laughed. Agnes's eyes welled with tears, not of sadness, but of gratitude and joy. As the day faded, Agnes slipped away to her quiet kitchen, now brimming with the warmth of countless voices and memories. She opened her recipe book and carefully inscribed a new tradition, the Feast of Second Chances. Everyone is welcome, always. Her story, once at risk of being written out by others, now filled the house. The love she'd shared, generous, defiant, and open, became the true legacy she passed on. And as she looked out at the snowy street, Agnes knew her table would never be empty again. Because family, she had learned, is what you make of it. And when you make room for others, you make room for yourself, too.